benefits to the conservation of biodiversity and sustainable use. So it tries, Article 9 of the Nagoya Protocol tries to make the link between ABS and the other two objectives, and for example, directing some of the funds to a fund, a trust fund, or specific funds such as the National Parks Fund. That could be one option to, again, first of all, integrate the different natural resource governance frameworks, but also to come back to the initial idea to provide for that ABS should be an innovative financial instrument for the benefit of conservation and sustainable use. So that was, I mean, of course, we had seen only a short time, but there could have been something which, of course, from an IUCN perspective, would be very important, because this is, at the end of the day, the basic idea of more interest that we all have in benefit sharing.
Yes, one observation. Oh, you want to react on that?
I have no solution, but I think Kent said the roots of problem is that the way the indigenous peoples rise in their traditional territory is under-recognized. So, you have to mention the property right and the registration system. But if we remove the M before, we have more money. We have no dead canyon, like the field heritage and as in our island, 90% of the land is possessed by the state, because traditional it is collected on, it is joint family property, and it is common access for the total tribe. So this is the basic problem. Then you go back to if you have the really rights of our own traditional territory, then go back to the 87. You say that. The key words is, again, the central and register. And in the first way, and in the last line of the Schedule 1, I think the Property Act is Schedule 1. They define the indigenous local community, ILC, means in a given area, a community of persons with a claimed historical association with or cultural affinity for the area prior to the colonization of the walking. Actually, every indigenous people is under one or the other colonial government. And almost every protected area of protected PA or the national park is on one or another indigenous people's traditional territory. This is my question, but no solution.
Yeah, just one reaction of, I mean, of course, the whole property rights issue is not only a difficult issue to tackle in the context of ABS, but also in other sectors or with regard to other issues. The problem, of course, the M have a problem there. They are nomadic, and that kind of might create a problem for them to claim or get entitled to their co-ownership, recognized co-ownership. However, from the other perspective, it is always a question, at least that's maybe a very European approach also. If you have a registry, if you want to know who holds the right now, then the registry clarifies it. So that facilitates also the process of for users, for example, to know who to go to. So I mean, it's always this kind of probably clash between different worlds where you need legal clarity with regard to the engagement of private companies and so on and so forth. On the other hand, the traditional lifestyle, which is in this case nomadic. So it's a kind of a difficult thing. But to move on, I hope that the rapporteur didn't leave off. Are you reporting?
Yeah.
Okay, so your turn.
Yeah. So in our cases, we are user country, the Amada. So actually, we would like to think about whether we need a PIC or not in our country perspective. So we think we don't need to PIC in our cases. So we are more user country perspective. So and we think in our country we need just a national focal point. We don't need a national authority, national conflict authority. We just decide national focal point and checkpoint and clearinghouse in our country. So and the national focal point can be the Minister of Foreign Affairs can dealing with the national focal point at some job. And checkpoint things we can seek the patent office and Lancia Nature Conservation Agency, they can work for the checkpoint for our country. And clearinghouse things, maybe Ministry of Trade, they can deal with some clearinghouse job. So, and we think in our country we have Nature Conservation Act. We can add some basic rule, basic concept of beneficiary in Conservation Act. And we also think we need to put or encourage some standard documentation for some company or some groups, some person who want to access some biological resources or who want to use products. So that's all.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, just the first impression, you mentioned several different ministries or institutions that would be involved. The question there, of course, is again how effective this institutional framework would be if you have so many players, how they can work together. I mean, with regard to the Amadale country, of course, you said you don't see the need for prior informed consent in your legislation. I guess that's because you think there's not that much biodiversity in that country. So the interest is more the user perspective. That's probably an option that will, or a way that will be gone by several industrialized states, especially also in Europe. However, in this case, so then you were focusing mainly on the compliance measures, and with that regard, Amadale was already, let's say, quite advanced, because at least there was a compliance measure, or is already a compliance measure included in the patent law. There is a checkpoint, in this case the patent office. However, if you read carefully this provision, there are a few things which could be improved. First of all, it only refers to inventions which are based basically on biological material. So TK is completely left out there, which of course should be covered. Then there is, of course, a reference, or at the end of the provision, it states that the validity of the rights based on patents remain unaffected, even if the information is not disclosed. So then the question arises, if there is no consequence, if there is no penalty or punishment for not disclosing the information, what, how much does this provision help? Because it will not, the threat of what will happen to a researcher who will not disclose this information is probably quite little. So a question that could have been raised by you is whether you change this provision and in a way that if information is not disclosed as foreseen by this provision, then a patent will not be granted. For example, that would be, of course, an incentive, a very strong incentive to provide the information, or to include a penalty, things like that. Yeah, then of course in your case, since it is a federal republic, Armada is a federal republic which has federal states, and there was also a provision on the Flora and Fauna Protection Act of the federal state of Ramsey. The question arises, what needs to be regulated at the state level and what at the federal state level. And that is, of course, I mean, beforehand we had a participant from Pakistan here in the earlier session, and I don't know a lot about the legislation there, but what I heard from other people was that I think in this particular country it is a big issue that the states have actually, that the national government has problems to regulate ABS, and that every federal state or region has actually the right to develop its own ABS legislation. So then, at the end, if every region has its own ABS measures, this will also probably not be very efficient and lead to confusion on the user side, and therefore not really comply with facilitated access. Any other comments?
Yes, few comments. Yes, indeed, this federal system, what you just mentioned, Thomas, is a big problem. Australia has a problem with individual federal states enacting ABS legislation before ABS legislation was there at the national level, and also the variance between the getting access to federal state biological genetic resources is an issue in Australia. It's an issue in Brazil, it's an issue in Malaysia. All countries which have federal constitutions and where states are progressing implement ABS measures before the federal level even started to think about ABS seriously. So that is creating quite a confusion. What was said before on countries not requiring PIC, that sounds very easy because you avoid setting up any permitting process and procedures. But having in mind the ABS clearinghouse and permits which are being sent there will become international certificates of compliance. It might come the point, maybe, definitely not in the next few years, but in the medium term, there might be the point where the companies, the industry, will ask and do research only in countries where they can actually get an international certificate, because the international certificate might be the instrument for proving you have obtained the genetic resource legally. So if your country doesn't issue an access permit, the company or the researchers, the scientist, cannot get an access permit. Therefore, he cannot get an international certificate of compliance. And if, for example, scientific journals would require a certificate of compliance as proof before they are ready to publish, then he cannot publish. So there might be the need also for countries, even if they don't decide to have a full PIC procedure, that they have still to issue access permits. So that is something which may come up, and that's something what we are highlighting also in the discussions in the EU, that it's not that easy to avoid to set anything up. They should think and reflect about industrialized countries setting at least up a procedure to issue access permits, which can be a very streamlined, very easy procedure. You submit your proposal, you get an access permit, and that is transferred. So that is not a burdensome administrative procedure. That may become an issue if the ABS clearinghouse and the checkpoints will become an effective instrument for monitoring and tracking. That's at least what all of us are hoping for. Other thing, what intrigued me was that neither the government of Morgley nor the ISCs of Morgley realize that they have nothing in the legislation about access to TK. It's all access to resources, biological resources, genetic resources. There's no one word in the whole document about access permits issued on associated TK. And even the company was asking for access to the TK, so I'm a little bit surprised that you somehow missed out this important dimension of access and benefit sharing, because TK is very often providing the lead to the development of cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, phytopharmaceuticals, and so on. So that is something which you need to keep in mind. It's not only about biological and genetic resources, it's also about granting access and giving prior informed consent and issuing access permits for associated traditional knowledge with genetic resources.
Just one comment to your first point with regard to, let's say, user countries at least providing something to get, to have an international certificate of compliance. Not 100% sure, but I agree with that, because I agree that there is a problem, right? However, at least how I see it is that there is an obligation to clarify whether you require PIC or not. If that, let's assume you decide like Hamadale, you don't require PIC, you need to clarify that at the international level also. This decision needs to be provided basically to the ABS clearinghouse. And in that case, if that information is posted on ABS clearinghouse in whatever way, then that actually replaces the international certificate of compliance, because then it is clear. And because what the user needs, because you said that they will refrain from doing bioprospecting in this country, what the user needs is to be on the safe side. Okay, either I can prove that I have PIC and MAT, or that I don't need it. And this possibility of not requiring PIC is still there. So somehow, I mean, it's not foreseen in the protocol, but I would say, that would be the easiest way to decide that in the ABS clearinghouse mechanism, there will be also information provided or published on countries that do not require PIC.
That creates a loophole which we can discuss bilaterally later on. I think that will create more confusion if we dig into that deeply.
Last point that I would like to make, because there was something that unfortunately I forgot also to mention, referring again to paragraph 36 of this federal state legislation, the Flora and Fauna Protection Act of Ramsian. This one is again a user measure, because it says that the import in this federal state of genetic material from a place that requires consent may only take place in accordance with such consent. So here, this is a user measure. However, it refers to the import only. So Andreas this morning, at one point in his presentation, also showed that there is this whole chain of utilization. It comes, from one party importing it or collecting it, importing it to others, then selling it on the market, others buying it, further developing it, and so on and so forth. If the checkpoint that is established or the user measure only refers to the import of a resource, this can create again a huge loophole. You could set up, something like a fake company or someone who's just trying to import the stuff, and whatever else then later on happens. The company, let's say, or the researcher who really wanted to use it, it doesn't fall under any such obligations. So it would be better, from my perspective at least, to refer again to simply to the utilization, because then and you can define that utilization in a way that it kind of covers the whole chain of use, from importing to selling to developing, etc., whatever steps there are. So, and this is something also, a loophole taken from an existing ABS measure, national measure. So if there's one further question.
I would like to response to Dr. Andrew. You mentioned about TK. In our internal discussion, we have talked about it. But this is another central registration problem. Where is TK? TK in our blood and also in our brain. So the government or somewhere they say, you have never registered, so how can you have rights? How can you to claim your rights? So this is also one of the central registration problem. And also we need your help as the indigenous people. But in the positive side, or for the positive action plan, we have tried, learn maybe from Harry said, hey, we can try to write down our own biocultural community protocol. This is the way we can go to the WCMC and we can register as